We're taking a break now from the High Court as we continue with our look at the life and legacy of O.R. Tambo as we join in the centenary commemorations marking the birth of the late former ANC president. Activist and former judge on the Constitutional Court, Judge Albie Sachs, joins us from our Cape Town studios. Judge Sachs, welcome. It's a pleasure to talk to
you. Good day.
Judge Sachs, you worked closely with O.R. Tambo and you yourself were in exile in the 1980s. There's really so much we can talk about today, including the work that you and O.R. did on the Constitution. But I want to start with how you met him and the relationship you and he shared.
It started off with the Defiance of Unjust Laws campaign. And volunteer number one was the legal partner of Oliver Tambo, a certain Nelson Mandela. And volunteer number 8,843 was a certain Albie Sachs. And I think, if it wasn't for apartheid, we would never have met because it was anti-apartheid that brought us together. And I was a 17-year-old second-year law student. Whenever I traveled from UCT up to Johannesburg, I would go to the office of Tambo and Mandela and Tambo. I'd be offered a cup of tea. They were extremely busy. They wanted to know, what does the young comrade say about the struggle in Cape Town? I always said the struggle was going well. But they embraced me with more than a cup of tea. It was like saying, you are welcome in the struggle. Then I was 17. And we fast forward to 1967, a very important meeting in in London. We were in exile. And Oliver Tambo addresses us, and he tells us that he's been asked by the National Executive to announce to the world that the Albert Luthuli Brigade of Umkhonto we Sizwe crossed the Zambezi River into what was then called Rhodesia, got involved in a firefight with the troops of Ian Smith, supporting white supremacy there, and left a number of bodies on the field. And we stood up and we cheered and we cheered and we cheered. Now we are fighting back at last. And a voice behind me says, that's murder. That's murder. And we're wondering, what's O.R. going to say? We've been denied our rights. We've been oppressed for centuries. Conditions are getting worse. Of course we fight back. How can you call it murder? And O.R. thinks for a minute. And he says, yes, maybe the worst thing that apartheid has done is to turn young people who otherwise might have grown up to be doctors and nurses and accountants and engineers and farmers and teachers to become killers.
So then
I was like stunned. He never lost that sense of humanity.
Yeah. So that goes in line with all the descriptions of him as being a very humble leader, as being not such a quiet revolutionary or a gentle revolutionary. Is that a fitting description for him?
Yes, I've been saying very much there's a place in a hard struggle for soft people. And Oliver Tambo, in that sense, was soft in his demeanor, his manner, his style, but very strong inside. It was like tempered steel inside. And I don't like the word humble because it makes him sound meek. He was proud. He was a proud African. He was a proud Anglican. He was a proud revolutionary, a proud freedom fighter. But it wasn't a pride in himself as an individual. It was a pride in the nation, in the people, in the struggle, and his comrades. It was people, really, we admired our other leaders, but we loved Oliver Tambo. And maybe it was because of these very, very special human qualities.
Was there a shift for Tambo and others when the fight against apartheid would become less moderate and more militant? Was that the moment that you were describing?
Not a shift, it was an evolution, not just for him, but for all of us. For the whole of the 1950s, non-violence, non-violence, non-violence. And after Sharpeville, after the suppression of the ANC, the PAC, the Communist Party was already banned, no voting rights for the people, you couldn't even complain about the lack of rights. The decision was taken, armed struggle must be a component part of the people's struggle for freedom in this country. So it wasn't a choice between armed struggle or a popular movement involving the unions, the faith communities, international isolation, the boycotts, every kind of mobilization, but it did include armed struggle as a component. And for all of us, it was a wonderful moment because now we are hitting back, but also a terrifying moment because the consequences of violence, who knows where it can lead. And the greatest tribute I think one can pay to Oliver Tambo is he said, "Maishlome." He supported the freedom struggle. Amandla. And he was for this freedom struggle, heart and soul. But he never lost the understanding that inside the freedom struggle, we must be just, we must be fair, we must have a morality, we don't go in for terrorism, we don't use torture. And as soon as it becomes possible realistically to negotiate, in those days we spoke about a national convention for a new democratic South Africa, then we move to that. Because we want peace in our country, we want our country to move forward, but only on the basis of rights for everybody, freedom for everybody, no white minority veto, no power sharing between ethnic groups in parliament, a united South Africa, people being protected through a Bill of Rights that protected everybody equally, not because you're a majority or minority or black or white, but because you were a human being. And that was the huge contribution that he made, in addition to keeping the ANC intact in exile. When other exile movements were splintering, he kept it intact. In addition to the huge international campaign to isolate apartheid South Africa, free Nelson Mandela, and the economic boycotts, the sporting boycotts, the cultural boycotts. In addition to all that, he retained that element of integrity, personal integrity, integrity of the struggle, honesty, and never allowing personal ambition to take over what was really a struggle for the rights of the people.
And in moving to that shift of democracy and rights for the people, he was, instrumental in that constitution. And you worked closely with him in putting together that constitution for the ANC, which later became our constitution.
The foundational principles, and really the issue in those days was group rights, which was being heavily pushed. So we would have had Zulus representing Zulus, Afrikaners. We would have had 3 presidents. Can you imagine? Mandela on Monday and de Klerk on Tuesday and Buthelezi on Wednesday. It would have been a total disaster. And it was that group rights approach that he resisted completely. And he said, we are all South Africans. We've got to accept majority rule. The majority of South Africans happen to be black, but people are protected, not because of their race, not because of their fears, because they are human beings. And he lived his life respecting all people as human beings. It wasn't just an idea on his part. Totally against corruption of any kind, totally against any abuse of office or using your position inside the organization to feather your own nest. Utterly against that completely. And so we just respected him for his thoughtfulness. He'd be the last one to speak. He called the ANC the Parliament of the People. He was totally in favor of freedom of speech inside the organization and in the new South Africa, a natural Democrat. And so we owe so much in South Africa to his vision, his consistency, and his humanity, and his love for law as an instrument to protect the rights of the people, not to oppress the people.
Judge Albie Sachs, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts. Former Constitutional Court judge and activist Judge Albie Sachs talking about the life and times as we remember the late Oliver Tambo.